So, you all had to wait a week before watching this episode, but I couldn't. I could not wait! It's Romania Black! No, I couldn't wait. I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry. It is the series finale of ORB on the Movements of the Earth, and I'm sorry, I could not wait. After last episode, I'm like, oh, you're going to end on that cliffhanger before the final episode? Oh no, we're not waiting a week. So I'm so sorry y'all have to wait, but I had to, y'all. I could not help it. So episode 25 came out today on Patreon, and I have not looked at any of the comments yet, but I thought that, okay, I will talk about some comments, talk about some theories I have before diving into the final episode, because I have thought about it. It has been a couple days since I have watched episode 24, so I'm not just watching this like the next day. I did wait like 48 hours, and I've been stewing on it, and that's kind of the reason I've decided to watch it, but I have some theories that I wanted to posit before we dive into this, and do that. And then afterwards, I know that Jav Gamer wanted me to react to the music video for Kaiju. I'm going to look at that, so we're going to do that. But I'm also going to go through the comments that I have seen on Patreon so far, this is Tuesday, the 20th of January, as I'm recording it. I am going to go ahead and look at those comments, and then if there's anything that I want that is going to add to my discussion, I will note that when we start the actual discussion, and then we'll save the music video for the very end. But I do want to give a shout out before I talk about these first few comments and my theories. I want to give a shout out, and I hope you all give a shout out to Truck and Geen, because not only have they been like cult leaders, proponents of the series, helping me to get this series in the polls, helping to foster the channel. Honestly, I want to thank Truck and Geen so much, not only for checking the comments and being the moderators for this channel, for this series, but also because they kind of spearheaded getting the channel to vote for this series. And honestly, the last 24 weeks, this series has been honestly a godsend to cleanse my soul, to inspire me, to make me just feel so wonderful about, in the midst of a very bleak world outside, that there is hope, that we are just a stepping stone in the modicum of history, and that our future generations will look back and go, yeah, those times were sucky, but here we are. That's the hope anyway, right? But I want to thank you all for getting me to watch this series. I want to read the manga so bad now. It's definitely going to be on my list to get the manga so I can put it back on the shelf and I can read it and do all that. I'm so excited. But anyway, so with Thalmazen, I noted it as I was editing episode 24. If you watched episode 24's discussion, you may have noticed that little note towards the end of the discussion where I was talking about Thalmazen and about the idea of wonderment and how we always need to be puzzling ourselves. We always need to be trying to discover answers and asking questions. And I wondered, I'm like, is that why we did this change the last 2 episodes of the series? Is that why? To illustrate that theory of Thalmazen, that it's like, you think you've got the story figured out, you think it's the end, you think you've got it all wrapped up, and then episode 24 and 25 come out and it's like, you didn't expect this twist, did ya? And it just keeps you in wonderment and keeps you puzzled. I don't know. We may go back onto that thought once we look at episode 25. We'll have to see. Unikimi8 for episode 22 says, remember Bodini offered Aksha a 90-10 deal. Antony's deal doesn't sound too bad after all. I forgot about Bodini's deal with Aksha, but I'm like, oh, he was just joking. Was Antony joking? No. Antony probably would have changed his mind and been like, actually, I meant 1090 as well. So that was really funny. And then Deep Raj has had some great comments this season, but I really like their one for episode 23, where they say one of the most beautiful theses of ORB is that even if no one remembers your name or knows what you did in life, what you did will have mattered. There's so much to take away from this anime, and so much of it is timely. Yes, that is something that speaks to me, because I feel like we are told by a lot in our society and culture that you have to make a name for yourself, you have to be remembered, and oftentimes there's this fear that you'll be forgotten in the annals of history and nobody's going to remember who you are, and your essence ceases to exist after your name is forgotten. And that's a very scary thought. That's very scary, and it influences people, I think, sometimes to make decisions to leave a bad imprint on society, because they're like, well, at least my name won't be forgotten. And I'm like, oh no. But I do agree with Deep Raj that this series purports this idea that no, it's kind of like It's a Wonderful Life. No matter what you do, as long as you do something kind and considerate and well-meaning, even if no one remembers exactly who did it, your influence will have impact that will lead, it will create a ripple effect, and that ripple will spread out into ways that you can't even imagine until years and decades later when you see the impact of it. And that's just, it's such a good lesson. I love it so much. But yeah, and that kind of leads to Moomin. Their thoughts in episode 23. They said, the clergy is for sale. Why, of course. We have been here before. That long arc of justice is a bitch. Haha. I hope that we move from the age of money to the age of world citizenship and stewardship. I'm a little bit pessimistic as far as that goes. I feel like, at least in the US, we're so entrenched in capitalism, it would be very hard to claw ourselves away from it completely. However, Moomin continues, we only have ourselves and this damn rock, so we better take care of it and each other. I welcome a new age of enlightenment and humanitarianism. Unfortunately, we have to suffer first. Some lessons we continuously have to learn over and over again. Yeah, I do try to be a little bit realistic. I can be idealistic in my kind of social objectives. I do think that there will still be pockets of humanity that will continue to be enlightened and will be humanitarian and will promote that in other spheres. I think that those ideals will never go away, but just as there will always be people in the world that are trying to be a light and trying to be a force of good and positivity and inclusion, there will also be people that are the polar opposite of that, because we're humans and we love conflict. And as it's said in a very famous series, as long as there's two people on this earth, you will always have conflict. And it's just, how do you deal with that? So that's where we are. And then finally, I was having some thoughts as we go into this last episode. I was like, okay, we have Albert, who is in Poland, and he's met Raffle. And I was like, we have 2 episodes left. What is this leading to? And Albert's been led to this gathering of people and all of these thoughts and ideas and things like that. And we're still in flashback mode with Albert. So what is his conversation with the priest going to give? What is that going to lead to? And my only prediction that I'm going to put out there before we start episode 25 is, I wonder if this episode is going to end with Albert deciding he's going to write a story about a fictional universe where the idea of learning and everything is put to the test, and it's going to be the story of ORB. I know that this is supposed to be reality that we're in now, but I was thinking about it because my big hang up after rewatching last episode is if the P Kingdom and all that is a fictional world, Schmidt still talked about Socrates and Plato. So the philosophers of reality are in this fictional world or this parallel world. So how does that work? So we're gonna talk more about it. I want to see what happens in this final episode. The final episode is the same length as all the others, so I'm like, how are we wrapping this up in 25 minutes or less? I don't know. So we're gonna come back to that. But anyway, I really appreciate you all for watching with me. I'm not joking when I say that this series, unless another series beats it, it's gonna be up there in my tops. It's gonna be up there because it's just so damn good and it's so timely and it's so well done, and I'm kind of obsessed with it. So anyway, we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to start ORB on the movements of the earth, episode 25. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. I don't want to start it, but I have to. And let's go. I told you why Borg-kun was coming back for this one. What an episode! Wow. Okay, that ended a lot better than I was expecting. I was like, how are they going to wrap it all up? And then ORB came through, and it did. Now, look, I went back, and there weren't a lot of comments on YouTube or Patreon for this episode, so I'll be eager to see everybody's comments later on. And I'm going to be honest with you, as we dive into this final episode, I am going to give you my interpretation of what I believe this ending is and what it means for the whole series. And again, this series in itself, the title of the episode is literally a question mark. It's just a question mark in a box. The title of this episode is literally this. That's it. It's a question mark in a box. I get very frustrated when we have moments in fiction because I'm an English teacher. I have a master's degree in rhetoric and composition. I've spent years reading and analyzing literature. And one thing that I get frustrated on the internet is that much like poetry, I think poetry frustrates people because people want a concrete explanation of what it is. And poetry doesn't often give you that. A lot of times poets go, screw you, there is no explanation, figure it out for yourself. And it's like, blah, blah, blah. And so one thing I get frustrated on online is when there's like always, you all have probably seen those videos where it's like the ending of the movie explained, the ending of this. I cannot stand those videos. I don't want to watch them because one, the people that make those videos are not the creators of the story. So they don't know. They're just giving you their opinion of what they think the ending is or what it means. Or if they do have research, it's basically just taking the opinions of others, cobbling them together and forming their own opinion on top of it. It is not an explanation. It is not objective or factual. It's literally what they believe. It's not the answer. It's just an answer amongst many. And the great thing about fiction and stories are, unless the author just tells you right out what the ending means themselves in an interview, and they go in the interview and they're like, yeah, the ending means this. Unless an author says that, you don't know the ending for sure. You're just interpreting it of your own opinion. Now, a lot of authors won't say what the ending means because that's the whole point. They want you to generate a conversation. They want you to talk about it. You are probably watching this reaction video and discussion because you want to know my opinion of what I think the ending interprets as. So in the comments, the only thing I ask is I would love to know people's opinions about what they think the ending is. But there's one thing I cannot stand, and as an English person, I have encountered many people in my profession who are pretentious, and they're like, well, actually, this is what it means. And I'm like, you don't know. I'm like, you don't even know. You're just giving your opinion of what you think it means. So I would love to know people's opinions about what their theories are to the ending. But if you try to tell me that, oh, well, you're wrong about your opinion, this is what it is, I'm like, are you the mangaka? Are you the mangaka? Were you sitting there when they made the series? Then you don't know for sure. You're just offering your own interpretation. So I just want to start with that because I tried to get a little bit on Reddit and people was like, this is what it means. And I was like, as soon as I read like the first line of one, I was like, oh, these people online are pretentious. I don't want to listen to this. I want to just offer my own opinion. So I didn't read any of those. I want to just offer you what I think the series means, walk through this episode, talk about it, talk about a few things with Albert Brudzinski, because I was like, okay, come on, figures in history, and talk a little bit about them and then connect it all together. I think that will be fun. I'm excited about that. I want to do that, but I get so annoyed when people are like, this is what it means. And I'm like, no, what you're giving me is an interpretation. That's your opinion. But let's not get it twisted. This whole series is about how the objective answers you think are objective are perhaps not objective. So I wanted to get that out of my system now as we dive into this. But I had this theory that was formulating throughout the episode. And I was like, I wonder if this is what it means. And then the stuff with Podaki at the end, I was like, oh, well, that takes care of that theory. That's not it. But then as the scene went on, I was like, wait, no, it does make sense. It does work. So let's talk about it, shall we? And I want to start this by framing a little bit of what we've done throughout the series. So throughout the series, we really started with old Ringo Starr. Ringo Starr, which was Podaki. And we also had Podaki and his mentor / student / could be a ship of Hubert, of them working together. And they kind of had this mentor / friend / colleague, whatever you want to make of it, relationship. And then that led to Hubert kind of being Hubert. Also, I want to put down here, I think this is important for later on. Hubert was, they are mentors. Both Hubert and Potaki were both mentor figures. Let's put that together. Potaki, we're going to put a little placeholder here. And we're going to put a little placeholder here. And also a placeholder here. Well, let me back this up a little bit. I also want to put, we're going to put child Raffle here. We're going to put child Raffle here. All right. And child Raffle, coming from this, I'm going to also put, basically it looks like I'm making a Mad Libs, but I'm going to go back through all of this and kind of purport it. But then we also have Novak, which we're going to put here. Novak and Yolenta. And kind of representations of what they have. And then Draka, representations here. And Aksha, we're going to do that as well. And then we're going to put Bodini over here. This is all going to make sense at some point. And then Antony, of course. Antony, and then I'm going to put Others by Antony. And then we're also going to put the blonde inquisitor. The blonde inquisitor. Actually, I'm going to put, I should have organized this all before talking to you, but I want to put the blonde inquisitor up here. We're going to put the blonde inquisitor over here by Bodini. And then the redhead that saves Yolenta. We're going to put them all here. Okay. This will all come back and be relevant later on. And then Father Grabowski, we're going to put Grabowski here, all of this. By the end of it, I thought we were in a parallel world, but then at the end with the whole Potaki thing, I was like, oh, okay. The whole thing that we had up here, we also have the letter, right? The letter that talks about the book that's called Orb on the movements of the earth. And we're going to put that up here at the top, right? Have our little orb. And then over here we have Albert. What's interesting is, the first thing I will say is that in my mind, these are all my opinions. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not the mangaka. I could be very wrong. This is my interpretation. These are all opinions. You're just hearing one interpretation amongst thousands on the internet. But my interpretation is, to start out with, that Albert's the main character. He's been the main character all along. And it took us until this episode and the very end with the Potaki scene to realize that he's the main character. He's been, actually, in my opinion, Albert is the narrator of the entire story. We just get his origin, and it's kind of a weird, in my mind, it's a weird reverse narration where we started out with the story that was made up and the myth, and then we got the origin of the myth at the end, and it's like, oh, okay. This is where it's all come from. And we're going to connect all these characters. It felt very Wizard of Oz. It felt very Wizard of Oz. That's what this felt like. And if you've ever watched and I'm not talking about the book, because I have the book Wizard of Oz. I'm not talking about Wicked. I'm talking about the original 1930s Wizard of Oz movie. Because in that movie, you had Dorothy, and Dorothy went on this adventure, met all of these characters. There are all these references. A lot of the characters in the 1930 movies, like her uncle, like her two uncles in the movie, play the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. And then when she goes back home, it's the same actors playing her uncle. Her Auntie M is also in there. And then you have the Wicked Witch is like her neighbor that's mean. Like, it's that crossover there. And it's a very circular kind of narration. We're going to get back to all of it. Just keep with me. But the point is, a lot of things that Dorothy encounters in real life, when she gets knocked out and transported to Oz, she re-encounters those memories, re-encounters those points of her life through these made-up characters that are reflections of parts of herself or parts of people that she knows. We're going to go back to that. But that idea of Oz and kind of transporting to this other world that is a reflection of the world that exists is something that, in my opinion, translates back to Orb and where we go from here. Because the whole point is that the sun is in the center of it all, right? The whole point is that the sun is the center, And we are all revolving endlessly around that same center. And if you want to say that it is due to a cosmic force or an entity, and you want to believe that, there's this concept of combining belief and doubt, which I loved the preacher's speech at the end, which we'll talk about, this idea of belief and doubt kind of tying together. We're going to come back to that. But before then, let's go back to Norman Bateman, aka Raffle. This man, Raffle. So we are going to put up here, Albert's mentor is this man named Raffle that ends up killing his father because of a dispute over materials and ideologies. We're going to come back to that. So yeah, let's tie up into that. So yeah. So I'm going to also start this to go along with you all on the sidelines here and show some screenshots along with this to kind of further my interpretation as we go. So we do 3, 2, 1. Again, I feel like Raffle is, God, this version of Raffle, I don't like him. He's like, I have no doubt that we are those who will inherit the coming age. It felt so... There were red flags all around this version of Raffle, like red flags that made this seem like a dream scenario and made me question it because I was like, well, and of course I'm coming at it from the sensibility of somebody in the 21st century, whereas in medieval times, yeah, let this kid walk on his way home by himself. The worst that could happen is a wolf picks him off, you know? So I'm looking at it from the sensibility of modern times, whereas back then, I don't think it would have been as much of a big deal. But this Raffle does raise some red flags. So yeah, so this Raffle, as we see him, is in his 20s. Seems like he's in his 20s. He's young, early 20s. He also has a baby face. He's also meeting the criteria of literally every serial killer in the latest century. So there you go. But he's like, I have no doubt that we are those who will inherit the coming age. We've broke free of prejudices and discrimination of old, and we will freely, nimbly, and elegantly plunge into the unknown. It was quite a speech. This part here where he claimed that Albert he's like, we have a new comrade to join our quest. There was aspects about this that felt kind of cultish. Like, Raffle was asking him to drink the Kool-Aid. It felt kind of cult-like. There were aspects about this that felt very like wish fulfillment for a kid. And for a moment, I thought, okay, this is a seinen, isn't it? Is a seinen? Is it a shonen? If it's a shonen, then it's targeted to a younger male audience. So maybe this is to like, it felt like it was suddenly targeting a younger audience, being like, yes, your curiosity is important. Don't ever lose that. And you can join the ranks. But I was like, that's in stark contrast to the themes of the tone of the rest of the series. So it was very interesting. It almost felt like a kid's wish fulfillment. And like this was like a dream, right? And of course, poor Albert, he's just like, okay, I'm with all these adults. This is interesting. You know, I felt so bad for kid Albert because he is this little kid that doesn't exactly know what to do, you know? He's like, and meanwhile, Raffle's recognizing his genius, right? What's even more remarkable is his intense curiosity. So, something that he is well known for as a kid is the idea of just his intense curiosity. So his intense curiosity, and we're going to come back to, there's a part of me that feels like, and I'm trying not to get the cart ahead of the horse, but there's a part of me that feels like Raffle as a child is a combination of the Raffle that Albert knew and himself. I guess I might as well just go ahead and talk about the theory about this. I think that the P Kingdom and everything that has preceded before this episodes 24 and 25, in my opinion, I feel like it's not necessarily a parallel world, but it is this mythos that Albert has constructed that is in connection with his own thoughts as he moves forward in the story. And because every character that we have seen throughout this, as I'm going to like explain this Mad Libs, every character is a combination or a reflection of parts of Albert himself, parts of Raffle, parts of his father, and parts of the priest. So your characters that you have in the present time and parts of the baker. So your present time characters are the baker. You have the baker. You have Raffle, the serial killer. You have the dad. You have the priest. And you have Albert himself. So these 5 characters have shades of them or representations that are featured in all the characters throughout our story. I guess we should also put Schmidt on there, right? We should also put Schmidt and Free on there as well. We're going to put Schmidt and Free on here as well. So they're all shades of them. And if you think about it, you're like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. So for example, and I guess we might as well just dive into it, because otherwise I was going to save it to the end, but it's just, I'm not going to make it. And I'm sorry if this feels so jumbled, but my mind is racing with ideas. And as I go through, maybe it'll all start to spread out and pan out. But for example, Podaki, in a lot of ways, is similar to the dad character for Albert. Podaki is restrictive of the knowledge that Raffle learns, which is very similar to the dad with Albert. He's like, what's the purpose? And he ties it to theology. And he's like, unless it serves people and serves God, you shouldn't learn it. And that's very much like the dad with Albert. Whereas Hubert, in a lot of ways, I felt like Hubert was not Raffle necessarily, a tie to that character, but Hubert was like similar to the priest, as well as he was similar to the priest, and Bodini was also similar to the priest in a way. Like if Hubert and Bodini combined, it would kind of become the priest character that he talked to in real life. And also the Blonde Inquisitor, we'll get to the confession from the priest. The Blonde Inquisitor also is tied to the priest, because the story about him and his friend who's killed helping Yolenta, that's all going to be connected. And then Bodini, who killed his friend who had the thesis, that's a connection between them as well that also ties to this priest. Then you have Child Raffle, which is a combination of the real Raffle and also of Albert himself. Because the whole time that Raffle in this current timeline, in this current reality, is talking up Albert, it kind of felt a little bit like Child Raffle from the beginning, right? It felt a little bit like it. And he's like, I'm afraid. I say this because I am afraid that perhaps in the future. Now, this whole thing here where he says in the future, the view that truth is conceived rather than discovered. I was like, are we talking about modern times? Are we making connections to modern times in this? I feel like we are a little bit. So when he talks about the truth conceived, it may be an assumption of sorts. No, that's the thing. Written works of the past and other countries describe different histories, cultures, and faiths. Information is in short supply now, but if we connect those foreign to us in days to come, then even truth may one day be seen as relative. That is such a crazy thing to note, especially in ties to our current climate with technology. We have access to so much information at our fingertips. We don't know where to start. And we have so much access that we take for granted the truths that are at our fingertips. We take for granted all of it. And I'm doing it right now. I could go look up other people's opinions about the ending, but who has time? I could later on, but I also wanted to give this reaction and my own opinion before doing that, because I didn't want my opinions to be what's the word I want to look for? I didn't want them to be influenced by someone else's opinion. Now, later on, I may go look up their opinions and be like, oh, that's interesting. That's a cool opinion. I hadn't thought of it that way before. And I'm going to read your comments where you're telling me your opinions, and I'll be like, oh, I didn't think of it that way before. That's a cool idea, a cool interpretation. Hadn't thought about it that way. So we take for granted the truths that are right in front of us about people's cultures, about their societies. We take that for granted, and it's just seen as like, oh, well, that's just commonplace. When really back then it was not. And he says there, when that happens, an awe and admiration for the ideal of universal truth may fade from human hearts. Well, that is very, very true of this modern day and age. I feel like as a teacher, it's important to keep curiosity going. You shouldn't just take one thing that one person says as the gospel. You should try to seek out other opinions, other truths, and challenge those. Doubt and belief. Like, you can believe in what somebody tells you about a piece of literature, but don't let it stifle you from trying to find other explanations and other meanings, right? Because they're out there. They exist, right? One of my favorite lessons that we learned was taking Moby Dick, and one of my professors, he's like, you can get an absolute... Like, he took a chapter from Moby Dick, and we read it out loud, and he's like, what do you think about this chapter? And out of context by itself, I thought it was really homoerotic. I was like, is that what this chapter is about? And he's like, I don't know, is it? And it's like, oh. And somebody else I was sitting next to in the class had a totally different interpretation. And I was like, I didn't think of it that way. And they're like, well, I didn't think of it the way you did. And our instructor's like, look, there's no right or wrong answer. These are just interpretations. But I do like serial killer Raffle's explanation that research will become increasingly specialized. Yeah, the more everything has a niche now, right? Everybody has a niche. I have a niche on this channel. I look at yaoi, I look at manga, I look at donghua, but it's like people find their specialties. I don't like being pigeonholed in a box, so sometimes I do kind of go out and talk about different things because I think it's important to like branch out and see as many things as you can, because as Raffle says, curiosity itself may be despised as frivolous and wasteful. That's what worries me about modern times, is that I feel like everyone just wants a quick and easy answer. And that's what I'm talking about with those, here's the ending of the movie explained videos. Instead of being curious, instead of reading the story and interpreting it in your own way and seeing what other people think too, and instead of looking at these different views and opinions, people are just like, I want a concrete answer and I want to move on. And I'm like, but the world isn't full of a lot of concrete answers. There's a lot of gray area and subjectivity. And that leads to people thinking that they start thinking in terms of black and white, and that's not the way the world works. And I don't like the idea of curiosity being seen as frivolous and wasteful. You should be curious. You should question things. You should ask how they work. I could preach about it all day. He's like, I couldn't help but feel sad. And that's why I choose that I believe in all of you and your curiosity. And he raises his glass to toast that moment. I also think the idea earlier of when we had Raffle with the drink and the conversation with Albert about how he would risk his life, I feel like that was an influence for child Raffle in the mythos to kill himself by drinking the poison. I feel like Albert, in retelling the story, tells it from Raffle being portrayed as this child, because it's kind of like there is a little bit in Albert in this moment. There's an admiration towards Raffle and kind of an admiration towards him as his mentor. And I feel like that might have influenced how he describes Raffle in the mythos of being this kid that died young, when in reality, when he was cornered by the townspeople, that was probably the most crazy part about this episode, is that we never find out what Raffle was cornered by. The townspeople all seemed like they were having a great time listening to him. Or maybe it was just this little cult in this pocket of people, and that wasn't what the majority of the town thought of him. We don't know. We're looking at this from Albert's child perspective, and we don't get an answer. We find out that he was taken away by the townspeople, but that's the last we hear of him. So, in my mind, my opinion is that Albert created this romanticized version of Raffle that was a kid, that was his own age, that was 12, that did the things that before he killed his father, Raffle was looked up to by Albert for. Like his ideals, some of the things he talked about. I feel like this child Raffle was a combination of Albert's own 12-year-old innocence and the things that Raffle said that inspired him before he killed his father. And then in real life, Raffle was taken away by the townspeople, and we don't find out what happens to him. In the story, child Raffle sacrifices himself, and then we have the whole thing with Novak, which we'll talk about. And then he ends up just becoming this martyr of sorts that inspires heliocentrism beyond his death, which we'll get into later as well. But yeah, So the big red flag to me was, Albert's having a great time. He's being influenced in this moment. We're going to get past the intro. God, I'm gonna be so sad that I don't get to the intro. I'm going to be so sad I don't get to hear the intro anymore. We're going to listen to the kaiju video here in a hot second. But yeah. So Raffle's like, I spoke too long again. And he's like, oh, excuse me. And he's like, oh, thanks. He's like, I don't know what to say, but I'm happy you invited me here. This was the red flag. Because when Raffle's like, oh, don't be so humble. We're equals here. He's like, I've got an errand to attend to. I was like, the moment he said errand to attend to, I'm like, where would he go? What would he do? Why can't you stay with this kid? Why are you leaving Albert there? That's weird. And so I had joked last episode that Albert's dad was killed by Raffle, and then when he left suddenly I was like, they're surely not gonna do that. And they did. I was like, oh shit, they actually had him get killed. Oh my god. But no, and they just left Albert. He's like, oh, just enjoy yourself. I feel like he brought Albert there to get babysat by this like group of philosophers. He's like, hey, I'm gonna drop you off at this philosophy conference and I gotta go do a thing and I'll come back later. So also I think that if we look at Novak's character is directly inspired by the adult Raffle. I feel like the adult Raffle inspires Novak's character because he is fully invested in his conviction. There's a part where Albert even says, he's like, adult Raffle was so enthralled and enraptured by his own convictions that he was able to murder someone. I'm like, that's Novak! That's Novak! Novak was so encased in his own convictions about heliocentrism that it enabled him to kill Aksha and Badini and the others. And so I feel like Albert, if he's created a character of Novak, drew inspiration from adult Raffle in this instance. Which, if you think about it, when adult Novak died, who does he see in his mind but child Raffle, which is an amalgamation of Raffle and Albert himself. So it connects, right? So I feel like Novak he was a creation from Albert that combines aspects of the adult Raffle, and then when he dies, he sees the child version of Raffle, which again is the combination of Albert and Raffle himself. It makes sense. It makes sense in my mind that happens, but again, that's just my interpretation. But he tells him to stay there, and the idea that Raffle was murdering Novak was the Inquisition, I think that's, in my opinion, that kind of connects and adds up. So he stays there to study cosmology with these people, and they talk about, he's like, oh yeah, I'll see you later. So he's sitting there, and they're talking about, who do they talk about in this moment? He says, I'm going to look up this person. What was the other word? What was the other person's part of their name? Shatir? Shatir is an astronomer. Okay. Ibn al-Shatir is an astronomer from the 1300s that was around the time of Damascus and 1304. His father died when he was 6. For astronomy, he was talking about the Ptolemaic models of the sun, the moon, and the planets, right? With them all orbiting. Yep. Okay. Which is what heliocentrism, it ends up influencing Copernicus, which we're going to talk about later. So it's all connected, right? It's all connected together with Copernicus. We're going to talk about Albert, and Albert's was a teacher for Copernicus. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, so even though his system was firmly geocentric, the mathematical details of his system were identical to Copernicus's. Furthermore, the exact replacement of the equant by 2 epicycles used by Copernicus paralleled the work 1 century earlier. His lunar and Mercury models are identical to Copernicus's, and he translated the geometric models to longitudinal tables the same way that al-Shatir did when he was constructing the solar model. So that in itself is literally Orb on the movements of the Earth. It's literally Copernicus taking al-Shatir's model and evolving it and developing it for later on. I'm like, that's the theme of the show. It is, honestly. But in the actual series, it gets it gets Albert to remember that he forgot to record the stars and the different ways, the observations of the night sky for tonight. And you would think, you're like, oh, well, Albert, you can just stay there and then go back and worry about it later. But he's a kid. So as a kid, he's like, no, I need to go home and I need to take care of it. Like a kid would be hyper-focused like that. He would go home and take care of it. So he does. And he runs into Raffle just sitting there stabbing with the knife, stabbing his dad. Which, if we go back to this model here, you have Schmidt and Free. There's an aspect of adult Raffle in Free. And there's an aspect of, I feel like there's an aspect of Albert in response to Free, because you have the idea of Free. Remember, he stabs the father of, or Free in this case, Free's uncle. Let me get this right. Free's uncle is stabs his father. So I'm going to back up on this. I feel like Free's uncle has some adult Raffle in him. And then with Free, I feel like Free and Schmidt are two sides of Albert. Free and Schmidt are these two modes of Albert that are in response to one another. You have the Albert that sees his father stabbed by Raffle and is horrified and does not understand why this happened and why this had to even be the outcome of it all. And then you have Schmidt, who is the response in repose to that of Albert later on, where he's like, well, I'm going to step back from the orthodoxy because this is the orthodoxy has betrayed me. But in Albert's case, Albert steps back from learning and from the university because the system of the university has betrayed him. So there's shades of influence there, right? I feel like there's shades of influence. And then I did not like this version of Raffle. This version of Raffle was so scary. I loved Kid Raffle so much, but that's the fictionalized mythos version, you know? So you like the mythos version because it cuts out all the nastiness, right? This version of Raffle that's tied to reality is not nice. He's nasty. He's like, oh, well, you see, he's like, this was a dilemma. He's like, and the way he's so cold about it was reminding me of Novak. How he's just like, oh, well, you just happened to walk in. Again, Novak, when he's torturing the one man and the kid walks in and sees, that's when we were introduced to Novak, when he was torturing a man and the boy walked in. He's like, oh, I'm sorry you had to see this. That's literally the introduction of Novak. This moment of seeing adult Raffle killing his dad is the introduction of Novak, just from a different perspective, through a different filter. And there's the little light on the table, the little candle of knowledge. He's like, well, I understand how you feel. You must be confused, but stay calm. If you deal with it rationally, and that's when he says, let me say first, I never intended for this to happen. I wanted to settle things peacefully. And ended up stabbing a man. Okay. All right. He says, recently I heard a rumor that these materials deal with a revolutionary theory that could change and reshape the universe, which Raffle never specifically says heliocentrism. He never specifically says it, but if we're looking at Albert being inspired later on with this whole story, you could say that this inspired Albert about heliocentrism. He's like, I've been interested in the theory for as long as I can remember, but I'd given up hope of ever tracking it down. And I finally found an entry point. So I proposed sharing the materials, and it wasn't a bad offer. I feel like that part about the offer connects to Bodini. That part about the offer connects to Bodini and what he was proposing and how we have these proposals of the model. But also I feel like the idea of the heliocentrism theory and tying it to the heretics, and then that also can lead down to tying into Antony and him wanting access to something to gain wealth from it. It wasn't a bad offer. The theory is beyond your father's grasp. That sounds like something Antony would say. He's like, it's beyond your grasp. You wouldn't understand it. That seems like something Antony would say. Without my intellect and my social... Now, this feels very Bodini. Without my intellect and social position, I would have compensated him fairly, but we both could have benefited. That felt very Bodini in that moment, you know? But that's when the problem started. He refused my offer. And instead, he insisted the theory conflicted with the prevailing models. I feel like a large part of the story as well is Albert trying to reconcile by creating alternative narratives. So in this case, you have, I'm sorry, my dog is like getting, buddy. I'm going to edit this so hard. I do feel like part of it is Albert's attempt to kind of reintroduce the narrative and change it in a way, because here you have Raffle offering the dad an opportunity to share the narrative and share it, but he chooses not to, which is kind of like Bodini killing off the friend that had that made the proposal and they didn't end up sharing it. But then later on in the narrative that we'd followed, Bodini and Jolenta and Aksha worked together to evolve the theory without killing the old man, which feels like a way to have what could have happened between Raffle and the dad come into fruition throughout the story, if Albert was telling it that way, right? So yeah, he's like, I have a child, I can't take on anything dangerous, which again, Novak having a child can't take on anything dangerous. I feel like Jolenta, in a way, is part of Albert and him being able to pursue learning, but she also represents that conviction unwavering the same way that Novak did, in a sense. Whereas I feel like Draka and Aksha are both forms of Albert. I feel like Draka and Aksha both forms of Albert, where Albert, that whole point of Albert looking up at the stars and not being able to stare at the sky, and the stars being eyes and looking down on him, that's Aksha. That's Aksha in the moment. And then Aksha encountering Bodini is literally Albert and the priest. It's a moment of Albert and the priest together having those conversations and influencing each other. Now, am I shipping Albert and the priest? No. But am I still shipping Aksha and Bodini? Well, hell yes. So yeah, I just feel like there's all these shades. And then Draka is Albert's skepticism about it all. Because the priest makes a note later on. He's like, you've lost your faith. And that's literally Draka. Draka had lost her faith. She's like, but I don't understand. And Draka lost her father. Draka lost her father while he had materials that other people wanted. The same as Albert and his dad. There's connections there. There's connections there too. And so he says, with the right political move, suppression could be easily avoided. That's the conversation between Antony and Draka. This is the Wizard of Oz. This series is the Wizard of Oz. The anime. The politically historical anime. But yeah, he's like, with the right political move, suppression could be avoided. But he wouldn't listen. Like, there are shades of this entire conversation and the conversation with the priest that echo throughout the entire story. My mind is just swimming. He's like, it was worse than that. Like, I feel like Pataki, and then we've seen shades of this. And with Grabowski and Bodini, you had Grabowski asking Bodini to be a part of the process, but Bodini was like, no. And then Grabowski later on turned in the book that led to Bodini being betrayed. There are shades of that through this conversation. Mm-hmm. Now, he says the dad got aggressive. Did the dad get aggressive ever? We're not shown particularly. But he said in the end, he would burn the materials. Bodini said he would burn the materials with Aksha. I feel like it ends up making Child Raffle and Hubert and the chest and all the materials within it, the whole narrative and all of that. It's all this mythos, this account of all of this that Albert has kind of fictionalized into this tale, right? This kind of urban legend. He's like, despite all his talk of knowledge and learning, I guess I shouldn't speak ill of your father. That's a very Novak thing to say. Yeah, in that moment. Poor Albert. Albert's just like, what? Like, I don't feel like Albert's sitting in front of this murderer. And he's like, I thought he might do something drastic. So the phrase that Raffle uses here that says, I pacified him. Your father kept knowledge to himself and refused to share. So it was an intolerable sin. And that way of thinking has to be eliminated. The important thing here is that the knowledge will no longer be lost. And the beauty of this world. What does he say about the beauty of this world here? He says to pursue the beauty of this world, sacrifices are unavoidable. Oh, that line. I don't know. I feel like to pursue the beauty of this world, sacrifices are unavoidable. I feel like that's somewhat true, but I think it depends on how much weight you give to the sacrifices. Like, what do you sacrifice to pursue the beauty of the world? I kept thinking of Full Metal Alchemist throughout this part of the discussion. The gate of truth. If you've watched Full Metal Alchemist, what's your gate of truth? What are you willing to sacrifice to gain that knowledge? That's a big theme in that series. It's like, what are you willing to sacrifice? I feel like in modern times, the sacrifice doesn't have to be anything major. It's definitely not your life necessarily. It could be, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And so, yeah, then Albert runs away. And he says, as he finished his speech, he was captured by the townspeople. Yeah, so the townspeople, when did they show up? What? And he's like, my father had doubt, and my mentor taught me to believe. As a result, he had such faith in his convictions that he didn't question murder. Again, there were, at this moment, when he starts talking in the confession booth, and I'm sorry my thoughts have been so scattered throughout this video, but I'm like, my mind is swimming with all these ideas and possibilities that's like fizzling out. I'm trying to gather myself. But at this point in the episode, I was like, oh, well, that's exactly like Novak and Yolanta talking about their convictions. They both had such strong faith in their convictions, they were willing to murder. Adult Yolanta murdered and admitted it. Novak did it, and we saw him do it. So it's like, again, tying to this tale, this methodology here. Truth and learning are too big of a burden for humans. It's a fool's path. I hated that Albert was saying this because I'm like, come on, my dude, you can't think that. And I'm glad this priest comes in and says, would it hurt to have both? I feel like Hubert's character is influenced by the priest. I feel like Bodini is influenced by the priest, and Raffle too. I feel like maybe there's aspects of the Inquisitor, the blonde Inquisitor, that's influenced by the priest as well. He's like, would it hurt to have both? He's like, well, yes, it would. We would conflict each other. And I like that the priest quotes Thomas Aquinas and said he wrote that knowledge is both material and immaterial. And talks about how that they can coexist together. Philosophy and theology, doubt and belief. Those contradictions coexist. Because that's a big theme of the series, is the idea that you have to have both. You have to want to believe, but at the same time, you always have to question things, right? He's like, this is because we're human. And that really influences Albert in that moment. I loved this line, human beings are neither God nor beast. We're somewhere in between. Because we're so smart. And we can think so many things, and we have so much power. But at the same time, we're also animals. It's crazy. We exist between the two. Such things provide a breather from reason. He's like, listening to you, it seems you no longer feel God's presence, which made me think of Draka. Also, Albert kind of looks at times like Aksha. At times, he looks like he could be Schmidt. At times, Free. At times, he looks like he could be a kid of Draka. Like, he's a combination of all of these things. Yeah. So he's like, let me tell you about mine. He's like, miracles are chance phenomena that occur when inevitability rules. And he says, they're also inevitable phenomena that occur when chance rules. Those things, you felt those things back then. You knew everything in this world is a miracle when you looked up at the sky. I love the theme that the stars and the sky prove miracles exist. I love the theme that the night sky, the sun, the stars mainly, the stars and the moon, all that in the sky represent all the possibilities that exist and are just show the beauty of our world and how mysterious and wonderful it is. He's like, your past and roots, and finally pain itself, even though the realm is where you truly belong. And Albert says that's not for you to decide. And he's like, well, it's simple. He's like, you just need to take a deep breath and look at the night sky. Which again, every time a character has had a moment of enlightenment, it's been looking at the night sky, except for Draka, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But every other character has looked at the night sky, which connects back to what the priest tells Albert. And then he cites Corinthians and says, God is faithful and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with that temptation, he will also provide a way of escape that you may be able to endure it. I do like that verse. I like that it's talking about, regardless of what you believe spiritually, there's basically the concept that things will get bad, but you will be able to endure and move forward. It's like darkness before the dawn. You'll be able, the dawn of a new day. You start over tomorrow and the day starts back over. It's just something like that. Yep. And so the priest makes his confession. He's like, you showed courage to speak, and now I want to share with you my worry. He says, I left a friend for dead. The moment he said that, I was thinking of the blonde inquisitor that left the friend for dead, that ended up being used by Antony to frame Yolanta. He says, in the course of his work, my friend committed a terrible crime, which again could tie to something irreversible. There's something that you could connect back to Potocki and Hubert, to Bodini and Aksha, to the blonde inquisitor and the redhead. You could tie all of these characters back to this same story, to Grabowski and Bodini. And then he says that as a result, he died. And it was the very severity of his sin that made it important to show him the path of salvation. What was the correct choice for me at that moment? I still have no answer. I don't know if I ever will. So I thought of the blonde inquisitor because the one friend made the choice of saving Yolanta and rescuing her against the other inquisitors, and that was a sin they couldn't forgive. So it made me think of him and his story, but also it kind of connects to Raffle and Novak, and yeah, it's so good. He says, before today, but now I'll probably suffer even more from now on that I've told you, and I'm able to move forward though. And he's like, now you can do the same. So yeah. And then what else does he say there? I like that we get the side by side in the confessional. God will always offer us a refuge. But for that to happen, we must overcome ourselves and face God with sincerity. And I also thought of Schmidt, where Schmidt, like at the very end, it's like you're offered a refuge, but you have to conquer yourselves. Schmidt's whole thing was that he was leaving it all to chance and wasn't taking responsibility. But then he did at the end when he realized he was a human and he had that power of that choice. I'm like, it's all connected. It's all connected, right? He says, in addition, whether we are worthy of God's acceptance, no matter how much we struggle with that question, God will remain silent. And he's like, that's what enables us to continue thinking without end. That's the thing. I love that. It's like, that is the point of whenever people are like, oh, I want stories to have finality. And I'm guilty of it too. Last episode, I was like, what do you mean that we're moving on to Albert? What do you mean we're moving on to a different world? What do you mean that there's another Raffle? I was guilty of it too. I didn't have the faith. I didn't have the faith, but the show is like, no. You don't need it to just, not everything has to be a nice little book-ended bow on top, cherry on top of the cake. You don't always need that. Sometimes it can go on without end and you can leave it ambiguous. Basically, this mangaka is giving every author an out to be like, don't worry, they'll continue it in AO3. That's essentially what they're saying. They're like, they'll keep writing the fan fiction. Don't worry, just leave your story ambiguous. They'll continue it on for you. But yeah, he's like, the greatest thing about there not being confirmation of some things is that we continue to wonder about them. We continue to think about them without end. And it just keeps on going, right? Like we just keep orbiting around that idea, but we never fully get the full grasp of it. I just love it. And what does he say there? He says, what does he say? To continue thinking without end. I'd like to believe that is happiness. Yes. So the mangaka is like, we're going to keep this story just a wee bit ambiguous so you can keep trying to have conjecture of what it means. and what it represents and what's real, what's not. I mean, I have this theory that this entire narrative has been a mythos created by Albert. That's probably not what most people think, but that's kind of how I interpret it because I see those connections. But I can also see why people would be like, no, that doesn't make sense. And he's like, I have a question for you. To obtain bread, one offers a coin. So we have this concept that was talked about at the beginning of the series, wasn't it? Was this not brought up at the very beginning? And I think this was brought up at the very beginning. So it's something that's been talked about in the series itself. To have bread, you need a coin. Yes, because it was brought up, was it not brought up around Raffle's time at the beginning? To get rights, one has to have taxes. To get bread, you need a coin. To get rights, you need taxes. This has been brought up before in the series. I know this exact wording has been. And he says to obtain wages, yes. Wages, one needs labor. Was this Gross and Aksha? Wasn't this Gross and Aksha? I think it was during them. Yes. And one offers labor. But, so then, what one must offer up to obtain truth. This was asked earlier in the series, was it not? What is the sacrifice for truth? For bread, you need money. For rights, you need to pay your taxes. For wages, you need to work for it. What do you sacrifice to get truth? That's literally it. I don't know. This was asked earlier on in the series, and I don't remember what episode it was asked in, or I would go look it up right now. But yeah. So then he's like, you can resume living in this world. And Albert's like, well, okay. And he's like, I think going to the university would be one way to find out. I'm glad he decided to go to the university because I do agree. I feel like you don't have to go necessarily and get a 4-year degree. You don't have to. Some people don't have the money to do it. They don't have the opportunity to do it. It's fine. But I would encourage anybody watching this to go at least beyond a high school diploma and at least get like a 2-year degree. At least go get your associates. At least go get that 2-year degree because at least you'll get a sampling of classes that can cover philosophy and other things and math and science and in a way that maybe goes beyond high school and at least give you something and spark curiosity. Like at least, even if it's just taking one class, like I've honestly, this series has inspired me that for teaching, I kind of can get more hours so that I can get up on my pay scale for my job, which would be nice. And my one colleague was like, well, I'm never going to go back and get my doctorate because one, it takes too long. I could not run the channel and get a doctorate. It'd be too much work. I'd have to stop the channel to go get a doctorate. And that would be 4 years worth. But also for what I do, I don't really need a doctorate degree and it's so expensive. It's so much money to go get a doctorate, and I just do not have that money lying around. But my colleague was like, you know, you could go take another class just to get some hours in. So I've thought about doing like a film theory class, which would be fun, or take some philosophy classes. Like this series has inspired that. So, I mean, you know, I feel like being a lifelong learner is important, and at least getting some education as you get older is relevant. It's worth it. Even if it's a class you're like, well, this is kind of dumb. At least you can learn something from it. Maybe, possibly. So then Albert looks up at the stars and I feel like this moment here too, where he's starting to connect the constellations and he stops when he gets to the point about his father. He stops when he thinks of Raffle and his dad. And then you see the part of Raffle saying to pursue the beauty of this world, sacrifices are unavoidable. He's like, no matter what happens, I will never criticize your curiosity. And that makes him continue to move forward. He's like, this man killed my dad, and I hate that. But also, I'm not going to just stop because of this one person and what they did. But this whole entire moment is so indicative of what Aksha like overcame to look at the night sky. It's so similar. I'm like, it's there. And then he connects them all together. And that's when he gets to see like the beauty of the world, the miracles of the world in the constellations and how we connect the dots and connect knowledge together. It's so good. I love it. I love that. Our final like shot of eyeballs looking into the night sky. It's so good. It's so good. And all the constellations. Which I'll admit, I like to make the constellations in the sky too. I don't take my finger, but I do always find the Big Dipper. If I'm outside and I can see the stars, I have to find the Big Dipper. That's like the big thing to do. So yeah. And it says, teacher, I want to pursue the beauty of this world. To do so, sacrifices are unavoidable. But I love that shot of him. Yep, but to be honest, and then he sees this shot of his dad. The shot of his dad with the knife and then the little lantern or the candle that's lit there next to the pushed over chair. And the chair being with, oh my gosh, the chair with Draka and Yolenta where there was the sword by the chair out in the sunlight. I know that seems so insignificant, but it connects to me. I feel like it connects to this scene. Yep, I don't know what must be offered up to know the truth of this world. But he's like, hiding things like my father or eliminating others like you are not the way to do it. Nope, that's not how it's done. So I love that he comes to the conclusion that he's like, you can't hide things like his father did, and you can't eliminate them. And all of this kind of ties to the fact when Antony confronts Novak, and Novak's like, was I the villain the whole time? I feel like it's self-reflection on Albert at that point, because Albert's self-reflecting on, I was staying true to my conviction that I wouldn't learn, and I was just making myself my own villain. Like, I want to learn the beauty of this world and see its miracles, and denying myself that, it was just making myself into the villain of my own world. And he's like, I can't do that. And Novak realizing that is a connection to it. So it's like, I love it. So then he moves forward, looks up at the sky. He's like, I doubt as I will move forward and believe as I turn back. My pursuit of beauty and inspiration will never end. I love these, like, I'm going to doubt as I move forward, so I'll ask questions, but I will believe in the beauty in the world. Taking both his father and Raffle, his mentor, all the lessons they learned at the same time. So then there's the bread maker, which the bread maker, do we view him as like Hubert in a way, maybe? Maybe, possibly. I don't know for sure. He's like, please allow me to attend the university. And then this whole scene at the university with the bookshelves and everything was reminding me of the university that Yolenta attended. And the guy's like, well, here, please sign here. And he just signs. And he's like, it's my last name's based off my hometown. I get that maybe not all people, depending on your class system back then, had a surname. I mean, it reminds me of when people came to the United States on Ellis Island and they changed their names to get in to simplify it or make it different. I mean, people's names have changed across time. Man, could you imagine going to a college and they're just like, take whatever classes you want? That'd be the dream, wouldn't it? That would be the dream. So then, okay, we're going to talk about this when he goes outside. We're going to talk about this moment here because he goes outside and this, to me, this scene cements it. To me, in my opinion, for my theory that the narrative that we've watched up until episode 24 was the mythos that Raffle has created, or that Albert has created involving Raffle and the others. To me, this scene and the scene in the village is what cemented it for me. Because when he goes outside here, he originally like kind of winces at the sunlight, which is what Draka was doing, and he looks up at it. But then, in that moment, you just see all of these characters. You see Raffle dying on the cross of his convictions, looking up at the sky. You see Aksha and Badini in the next one. I think we just see Aksha in this. You see Aksha, who is a representation of Albert himself and his fears. You see that dying, his fears dying, and him not being worried about it anymore and pursuing the beauty of the world. And then from there, you transverse and you see Draka embracing the sunlight and knowing that her worth, her life has value no matter what she does, and learning is worth. And then it cuts to him, and it cuts to him, it cuts to Albert. and him staring in the sunlight. And this part here where he's looking up at the sun and he's basking in the sunlight like Schmidt. And then does he do that with his arm? I want to look. Yeah. And he takes his arms and he stretches out exactly like Schmidt and Draka did. And takes that breath. To me, I'm like, oh, the story, these are all facets of Albert and how he's constructed this story about him regaining his faith. Yeah. And that's when we see the part about the letter. Now, the part about the letter, I was like, okay, so this is not a parallel world. And this person's like, well, this is definitely the address. And he's like, that's what it says. And he's like, okay. And I was trying to see what it said there, but it was basically the orb on the movements of the earth. We don't get to see who it's from. And he says, the previous occupant. I've never seen anything like this. It's like certificate of title. In the event the following book is published, you'll receive 10% of the profits. It's kind of creepy. Isn't it a weird name for a book? Orb on the movements of the earth. This literally is Albert. What this whole story started by Albert's conversation with the priest, his incident where he grew up. Basically, this whole thing started with Albert's father getting him this tutor that turned out to be a murderer, and then him going through this big period of existential dread, thinking that learning was terrible, then having the conversation with this open-minded priest that changed his entire views over again, and then he was walking down the street, stumbled across this random conversation. How many times have we heard a random conversation in a store or something happening? He was walking down the street and heard this random conversation about these people where they're like, oh yeah, so I got this letter and it says like you get 10% of the profits. It must be about the previous occupant, but how weird. And Orb on the Movements of the Earth? What a weird title for a book. And Albert's like, that's it. And that's the start of the story. He's like, well, where would this have come from? What would this have been about? What would this have been started from? And he took all that he knew, and this whole story kind of formulated from it. Which, again, is the cyclical nature of narrative. So it all goes in a circle. And it all comes back around. So it's not a parallel universe, in my opinion. In my opinion, it's not a parallel universe. It's just this cyclical narrative that he created that we, the audience, have encountered. He's like, that must be a mistake. After all, it's the heavens that move. It's way too suspicious. They didn't even send the book in question. And then from there, he's thinking about it on the movements of the earth, huh? And then he thinks about it for a little bit and stops. And that generates the question, but what about the movements of the earth? Wonder if I told a story, and what would that story be about? How did we get... This is all, how did that Orb on the Movements of the Earth story come about? Which would explain a lot, because we don't get a lot of answers at the end. We don't get the answers of, like, what about the printing press? What about this manuscript getting published? How did that happen? It's not answered because Albert doesn't know those answers. He's just guessing and building a story around this one little piece of what he'd heard. At least that's my interpretation. I don't know. It's my interpretation. So Albert Brzezinski enrolled at the University of Krakow. I said that wrong. I know I did. Gina's laughing somewhere into their tea at the age of 23 and would work there as a teacher for 20 years. I love it. I love it. And he says lectures were mainly on mathematics and natural philosophy because he was a mathematician. He was really good at algebra. He expressed skepticism towards the traditional geocentric model, which means as time went on, he questioned the geocentric model, you know, and then would later on in 1482, he wrote a commentary on the astronomy textbook of the time, The New Theories of Planets, and it would be widely read at the university, which was like his treatise. And in 1491, one of the students who learned astronomy from his commentary was a young man named Copernicus. And here's the thing. And then we see the little orb on the movements of the earth. So, if you don't know who Copernicus is, or Albert Brzezinski, He was a Polish astronomer, a philosopher, and a diplomat. A major accomplishment was his modernization of the teaching of astronomy by introducing the most up-to-date texts. He was an influential teacher to Copernicus, who initiated the Copernican Revolution. And the Copernican Revolution fostered the idea that the sun was in the center and that the planets rotated around it, which is essentially a form of heliocentrism. And it also connects back to this idea that people took the teachings of one person and it influenced them to continue those teachings and advance them and finesse them for the next generation. But yeah, he basically, he signed himself of Brzezwo. He was born in 1445 in the Kingdom of Poland. And he matriculated at the Krakow Academy, now the Jagiellonian University, I said it wrong, where he earned his bachelor's degree in 1470 and a master's in 1474. A student in Falconer's physical sciences and Glogau's mathematics. Yep. And he was a disciple of German astronomer Regiomontanus at the University of Vienna. Yep, so it talks about he drew calculating positions of heavenly bodies. There's a lot about his contributions, about planetary motions and everything, and his philosophies, but instead, a fictionalized account of him is the protagonist in the final part of Orb on the Movements of the Earth. Ha! Okay, yep. The fictionalized account. So there's not a whole lot in here. I'm sure that if you're from Poland, you know a big old amount of history about this man that I do not. But I just love the concept that we got to see this actual historical figure in the final act and got to see like an account of his upbringing, as fictionalized as it probably is, and then got to see him prove the theory or the theme of the story of inspiring someone else to contribute and continue on history and continue to question and evolve its concepts. So yeah, I am also going to apologize. I feel like this discussion would have been a lot more focused had my dog not been begging me. I've had to cut so many times in this, and my energy has been thrown off by my dog wanting me to throw a toy to him for an hour now. And so if this discussion seems all over the place, I am so sorry for my energy. My dog has literally just demanded my attention throughout it, and I'm like, I need to talk about Orb. What are we doing? So I'm sorry if I'm all over the place in this discussion, but that's just where I've been the last hour. But anyway, so let's look into this music video and see what all we get with the lyrics. I'm probably going to stop and start the lyrics because we're not going to time this video because I want to read the lyrics with you all. So we're going to do that though. I guess we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1 and go through it. This is Kaiju Sack in Action. Oh, we're going to turn the sound down quite a bit. Is this a kaiju on this dark night roaring over and over again? Oh! I'd leave it here. Oh! This secret. Okay. Right, I'm going to stop right here. Oh my God. Okay, so Jav Gamer was like, you should watch this music video because it's going to talk about some of the themes of the show. It's literally, it's an egg. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? Which came first, Albert or the story that Albert told? Okay. Okay. And the idea that it's passing on this knowledge, we're going to talk about this. Yep. Eating one after another. The red and blue stars. From the future to the past. Eating one by one. I chew them dozens of times. And swallow them when they've melted. Learning calmly and steadily. When I learn it all, I'll spill it out again. Oh, yeah. What is true until yesterday. Ooh, learning one by one. Interesting. The puzzle ring with dozens of spirals. Well, yeah, that mean I'll try until I can solve it. The loneliness fills me when I look at the stars from the top of the hill. Ooh, this is connecting directly to the show. But everybody's like trying to get the knowledge that he has, the egg he has. Uh-huh. Everybody's trying to pay him for it. And then he runs. What is this? But I'll have forgotten it by the time the morning glows on my hands. Nobody seduced anybody in this show for knowledge except maybe Auction Botany. No, don't give him the egg! The world is conveniently imperfect. I love that line. Also, this is giving me very 1993 Super Mario Brothers feels. Just saying. Yeah. So I want to know. Still, even if I roar to the farthest reaches like a kaiju. I'll just fade away again. This is why. I want to tell you, oh my god, all these people trying to get this egg. Thousands of times. About this dark night sky that we'll see again and again, yes. I love this song so much. About this knowledge. They just like rented an alleyway to do this music video. Another fruit grows. And petals are a thing of the past. Living a simple life. The soil and the trees are tamed. So let the flower bloom quietly. Oh, and here we go. The extension of the line connecting the dots. Oh, that's the extension of the line connecting the dots is literally the constellations that Albert does. Yes. And the sadness that follows because his father's been killed. Yep. Okay, this. But I'll have forgotten it by the time my eyes have adjusted to the darkness. Oh. Get out of the hallway. He could have gotten out of the hallway. Oh. I want to know. And we repeat that line. Norm. Oh, I like that. It's conveniently bright, conveniently imperfect, conveniently bright. The world is cruel, but it is beautiful. Yes. Oh, so he could have gone back to normalcy, but he chose to pursue the abnormal. I'll proceed. Now I'll roar so loudly I can be heard from many light years away. Ah! Which is literally us hearing this story now. And turn into a kaiju again. Oh my god! And the pin that the little girl gave him. Oh, Jesus! I guess he stabbed his hand. Oh. And somebody else grabbed it. And it just passes from one person to the next. Oh, that's so freaking good. That's so good. Oh my god. Oh my god. I love that. I love that so much. Oh. Look, I, again, apologize. My dog is at my feet. He's wanted me to throw this toy all night, and I'm going to have to edit this so hard, which I normally don't do. But my interpretation, in a nutshell, is that this was always Albert's story, and what we've seen leading up to episode 24 was a recounting of his narrative, his philosophies, his beliefs, retold through these characters, some that are based off of real people in his life, like Raffle, others that are amalgamations of characters that were in his life that he's also combined with himself and his own beliefs and his own doubts and worries to give to account, very much like the Wizard of Oz, this narrative. But the thing about it is that I could be wrong. And that's okay. That's just my interpretation. That's just my interpretation of the story. But the funny thing about it is my interpretation does not change the overall themes. It doesn't change the beautiful messages of this series. If I'm wrong, it still doesn't change like what we get from the symbolism, from the story. I guess that's the point, is that it's not a perfect ending, but it doesn't have to be. It's supposed to be ambiguous. It's supposed to make you question. It is Thalmasian. It is literally making you wonder and be puzzled. That's the point, right? But that's kind of the point. The point is to make you question it. It's to make you wonder, what's the ending? What does it mean? And if you don't have an answer, that's okay. You can wonder about it and pursue finding the answer through other means. I was really worried because it's hard for a series to stick the landing. It really is. When a series is amazing, that third act, you're like, how is it gonna end? But to be honest, episode 23 is literally one of the best things I've seen in a long time in anime. It's just, that episode is so incredible and it's so good. It's one of my favorite episodes so far that I've seen this year. I know I've just started, but it's already on the list. But I think the series sticks the landing. I was nervous last week. When I got done with episode 24, I was like, I don't know. When I got done with episode 24, I'm like, I don't know if it's going to work out, if this is all going to make sense. But it did. It made sense by not giving you an answer. You now have to take the story. And just like Raffle, just like Hubert, just like Akshen Bodini, just like Gross, just like Draka and Schmidt, just like all the others, you get, and Yolenta and Novak, you get to take the story now, determine what you think of it, and then move forward with it. And that's beautiful. And I love it so much. I could gush and gush and gush and gush about it, but I've already talked for an hour and a half and I'm going to have to edit this. And I want to talk with you down below about your theories about the ending and what you think it represents, because I'm very curious to know your thoughts about it. I have my own thoughts that I've just meandered around like a little Earth orbiting the sun for the last hour and a half, but this was so good and I love this series so much, and I'm probably going to get the manga so I can read it and think more about it and just continue to think. So I'm also going to apply everything from this anime into other anime that I watch. So if you can't tell, I'm very sad to stop talking about this series because it's been one of my favorites so far in this year, maybe in a while, and I hate the idea of not being able to talk about it anymore. So that's sad, but yeah, here we are. So we can talk about it in the comments down below, and I'm sure when I do my New Year's video for 2026, I will be able to talk about it more, and by that time, hopefully I will have read the manga, and by that time, hopefully I will have more articulated thoughts that are more concise than me rambling as I've been doing. But anyway, I hope you all have enjoyed my journey with Orb on the Movements of the Earth. It has been such a treat to share it with you all. I so enjoy it, and I really hope that you all have an amazing week. Please take care and come back as I look at other anime. It's going to be a fun year. There's lots of good stuff on the channel, but this anime is going to hold a special place in my heart. So thanks to this mangaka for creating an amazing series that I'm going to cherish and be spiritually and philosophically taking with me from here on. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I hate to say goodbye to Orb, but it's not truly the end, right? I'll be back again soon with more reactions, and until then, have a great one and keep moving forward and orbiting as you see fit.